Hello and welcome to the Port Huron statement. Alright, so I hope that we've all watched the news the past 24 hours and are aware that Congress is anticipated to vote to compel the release of 20,000 emails related to the Epstein investigation, which apparently include 8,000 explicit references to Donald Trump. Now this is actually a portion. It's the portion that come from the Epstein estate. So pretty much the individuals that have gained possession of his possessions have subsequently released them, or so I don't know what the full sequence of arrangements is, but whoever has legal ownership of the emails at this point is making them available, and Congress is going to try to compel their release. And so Donald Trump today announced an investigation into Bill Clinton, whatever his name is, Summers, the guy from Harvard, JP Morgan Chase Bank, and oh my gosh, there's one other key individual. It's Clinton, Summers, JP Morgan, someone else, some other political rival or whatever. But let's assume that this move was made so that he could try to block the release of the Epstein estate documents under the guise that they are part of an ongoing investigation by creating an ongoing investigation into Bill Clinton, etc. Now, it's interesting because, well, from my perspective, it's especially interesting. But, this is part of, it's not like Donald Trump is the only person culpable. And interestingly enough, I know in a very personal way that Donald Trump has been given a lot of opportunities to approach this with integrity and with a spirit of maybe healing and moving forward into a future that is not founded on exploiting children sexually as a means to advance a greater exploitive agenda, among other things. And Donald Trump, in a lot of ways, I mean, he's an absolute perpetrator, but he is also a victim because of the, manipulation of compromise. So Donald Trump is being leveraged by an enormous amount of blackmail material, and he is incredibly capable of slipping out of culpability. However, the Mossad and some other entities have real compromise on Donald Trump that compels him to make foreign policy decisions related to Israel, for example, also related to Russia. And I mean, this was a problem with Biden too. I'm not saying this is just Donald Trump by any means. What I guess is being said here is that Donald Trump continues to protect this network in a way that's pathological and implies that he has absolutely no intention of ceasing to utilize child sexual exploitation as a mechanism of political advancement, financial advancement, sociological manipulation. It's really effed up to know the totality of what Donald Trump and others are engaging in, like how it works. I mean, essentially, this is a massive deployment of psychological operations. It follows in this sort of legacy of utilizing religion under lesser understood technologies as a means to feign an authentic, like miraculous sort of religious experience, and in the ritual to elicit the religious experience, compromat is evolved. And so if the individual, so what you're going to do is you're on prime individuals, and this happened to the royal family of Russia. Rasputin, the monk, was actually an operative. This is for real. There's plenty of documentation on this from the Kaiser in Germany getting supplied. So the key element is just simple. An electrified table, turn of the century Russia. They dampen the electrical impulses, so it's vague shock. So it's just this difficult to describe and never have been felt before experience that becomes associated with Rasputin and the Holy Spirit, and is only incarnatable through having an orgy with Rasputin, like young girl orgy with Rasputin. And then so they're leveraging, if these girls get married, they'll leverage their husbands, or they'll leverage the women against their husbands. Like it will tell them if you don't. It's so messed up. But obviously they'll keep pushing the God thing if that works. And so, this concept of utilizing religion to access, it's not just religion. I'm not saying that only religion is the means of access, but this is among the means of access, and probably the most popular method at this juncture is to utilize religion to cherry pick children, varying ages. I mean, depending on what program, and it's stuff, because there are programs that have been designed that explicitly sexualize children around 5. And this comes from concentration camp behavior modification, where the concentration camp guards were trying to turn the young kids against their parents and families in order to root out any, plotting of an escape or sabotage. And they found that they sexualized these kids. So that's programs, not people, as a general term. And by doing that, you're going to prevent, generally, not 100%, but also with learned helplessness, a lot of negative and positive reinforcement, limited education exposure, making sure, high control environment, so they don't develop identity, so that everything is like cause and effect. Action figures, the idea of generating a person that can be controlled using assorted stimuli, including psychotronic weapons like Voice of God, Elrad, Medusa, Whispers, V2K, V2K Plus. There's a lot of these. There's a couple I'm missing. Oh, but then there's the RF and EMF technologies, photic driving. There are the neuromodulation psychotronics. So the idea is to entrain a frequency, to coordinate the subject's neural frequency, and then create an entrainment so that there's synchronicity between the subject and an imposed electric current, but they're synced. And then you modulate the imposed current as a means to offset neural pathways, because those are relying on neural activations, which are insulated, but not absolutely. So if you can just get one neural connection to jump, which isn't that far, based on an induced current that is synced to the, so you've heard of alpha waves, I'm sure, and about your brain. So your brain is these action potentials, these neural firings, right? Kind of like a clock or something. You're performing communications at a rate, and that becomes pretty consistent across time. Now it's changing up and down based on your attention and everything, but it's going to stay static based on like a task or whatever. And so you can create an entrainment and then intentionally modulate it to cause confusion and brain fog and stuff like that. And I mean, the real problem is if this is enabled to sort of disarm your memory, especially the detail of your memory, and you don't reestablish that detail, what happens is these memories become isolated neurologically, and so the psychotronics will cause dementia. I mean, there's all of these mental health problems that are unique to the United States are mostly associated with domestically imposed psychological operations and the sociological effects of, the fallout of that. There's an enormous, and it depends on where you're at. Port Huron is an enormously controlled situation because of the density of psychological operations that are being deployed against the population. So this is, the design community concept, the idea that you can use financial cornering, you can use housing instability, opportunity cornering, you can manipulate access to financing, and all of these things in concert with good old-fashioned, intimidation, violence, sabotaging, and then obviously weaponized sexuality, I guess you'd call it. There's so many different avenues. Oh my gosh, having read all this crap. Where was I at? Oh, yeah, so the Epstein stuff, blah, blah, blah. If it comes down to it, never mind. So what do I want? I want to start here first. Actually, yeah, excuse me. That was all ad lib. But today, or right now, I think that it's important to talk about a good example of something that I witnessed in media today, which is Michael Cohen, former fixer for Donald Trump. Because what he's doing with this podcast, Mea Culpa, which is Latin for my culpability or my fault or whatever you want to say, is he's admitting that his wrongdoing and pivoting to whatever you want to say about posturing and everything, and it is in his best interest, but that's the point, though, is he's not doing it in a scapegoating way. He's admitting that he is culpable, but pivoting to the point where this is a social problem, and that's the type of clarity, just, it's not like the world expects you to have a perfect past. It's that to continue to ruin lives in order to cover up this shit, especially at this juncture, it's self-destructive and it's immensely destructive to society, and the amount of money that is being poured into sabotaging American citizens because they might know about elements of this is a multi-billion-dollar cottage industry, which is another element of it. It's these psychological operations which run the gamut of, official CIA to reserve PSYOP units in the military to literally corporate and religious psychological operations. There are even literally personal financed psychological operations designed to contain inconvenient truths through discreditation, through gaslighting, financial sabotage, physical sabotage, intimidation, threats of murder, and even, of course, foul play and murder. Yes. And there is an enormous amount of evidence. It's actually fucking mind-blowing how, if you just go through public data, you can get an enormous amount of information on an elaborate network of exploitation utilizing 501c3s, charities and religions. So the religions are a laundering vehicle because of their special tax and auditing status. The charities become an embezzlement vehicle. So, oh my gosh, it's just so silly. So they're moving money through different marketing avenues and contractors. So you give the money to the charity then spends it in a specific way that then gets kicked through to the religion that then can launder it. In the Panama Paper, there are a lot of examples of politicians, not just politicians, utilize this, but one of the striking things was the realization that, I just want to start, but a lot of these inner city churches are being bolstered by this laundering scheme. Man, it's so messed up. The amount of drug trafficking that's being managed by U.S. government assets to fund black ops, which include an enormous amount of expenditures to protect the people that are orchestrating child sexual exploitation related operations. These include rifle type operations, again, William King Harvey, where they sexualize the kid as a means to create an unwilling sleeper cell assassin based on a trauma-induced cue. Sirhan, and then you're going to utilize the psychotronics before and after to create a profound amount of, memory fog. And so if you look into the Mikhail Shapiro stuff, you can use the Veritasium video, I think is the best one. So search Veritasium, blood-brain barrier, ultrasound, Mikhail Shapiro, stuff like that. So this is a technology that utilizes ultrasonic frequencies, wavelengths, to essentially resonate the blood-brain barrier, which is a fatty layer that prevents water-soluble, I should say, or ionic polar molecules from easily passing the blood-brain barrier. They can pass using osmosis, by osmotic pressure, very little. And then there are mechanisms that will, there are assorted pathways, means by which ionic compounds can pass the blood-brain barrier in a more, intentioned way. But this way, the brain is kept homeostatic from the contents of the blood. So it's not like your mood and your thoughts and everything are subject to your entire body's chemical whatever. It puts a, shield around your brain. And you're used to thinking without anything just passing this. But if you hit a person with these ultrasonic frequencies, then pretty much anything can pass the blood-brain barrier. This disturbs cerebral homeostasis, and you can still develop memories and stuff. But depending on what's in your blood, this can be very difficult. And so if you pre-dosed someone, it could be very, or if they even took a small amount of alcohol or any inebriate and you were to then compromise the blood-brain barrier, that inebriate could be adequate to compromise their memory. You could use just regular drugs. You could use naturally occurring drugs. There's a lot of different ways that you can do this. But when you combine the blood-brain barrier compromisation, especially with a pharmacological effect or something, and then more traditional psychotronics, so like B2K, which is going to cause a sound in your head, or LRAD, same thing, where these are different technologies than the EMF RF, where these are causing a sound from resonation or audio projection into your head. And so it seems like there's a voice coming from inside your head because there's a sound coming from inside your head that's mimicking a voice. And then there are EMF RF technologies that will stimulate neural pathways in a patterned way to simulate certain sensory impulses or create inceptions. And that's the most terrifying of them. However, becoming extremely aware of how these work and having had them deployed on me personally, this is not as terrifying as it sounds. If you're aware of the way they work, you can make, like, the effort, the juice not worth the squeeze. These aren't convincing. They're only disturbing if you think you're manifesting them yourself, because it's like the photic driving. You might see a humanoid figure in your peripherals, it doesn't really do anything to you. The voice in your head, the V2K without the LLM modulation, and the V2K sounds like a frog voice. If it's modulated by an LLM with biometric feedback, well, then it can sound like anything. And then, you talk about the voice of God technologies, which are the ones that, again, they're going to make you sound like a voice coming from your head. And then this is coupled with priming, where religious context is created and where you expect to hear the voice of God, so that when you hear it, you know how to interpret it, right? And then this voice is going to be utilized to leverage you in a sort of different ways. I mean, this is a huge Pandora's box of technologies used in an enormous number of ways. I mean, the first essential psychotronic is that table that Rasputin uses to convince these women that he's communing with the Holy Spirit. And so, when you understand the technology, it's like that. It's like, how did they get tricked with an electric table? Although this is a little different because, it is, if you don't know yourself, right? And that's the whole point of destroying the identity in the early childhood sexualization, then it becomes a lot easier to use inception technology to convince you of things. Also, if you create a religious interpretation that demonizes you for having thoughts, then you can incept someone with those thoughts and use that to create a shame dynamic. And then also when they create these paradigms where having a thought is equated to the act, the thing with that is that, alright, thoughts are mostly voluntary, but they're not entirely voluntary, in that your sensory experience will be regurgitated in dreams and in other internal mind-type experiences. And to digest and appraise information, you're going to have internal either representation or visualization. So, to say that thinking about it is doing it is a way to create a false equivalence, and then to foster and seize on the shame that you can manipulate by incepting people into having those thoughts, whether psychotronically or through suggestion. And you have to remember too, psychotronics are surprisingly ubiquitous. However, most of what's being achieved here is not psychotronic. There is a lot of pharmacological manipulation, a ton of appeal to authority, where people's position and credentials and expertise, their degree is being manipulated in order to create a false sense of trust and to enable manipulation. There's a lot of different things. I think I'm getting off topic. Back to Michael Cohen, actually. So the point that I think that's trying to be made here is that no one's expecting people that have either been sucked into this, threatened into this, or culpable, even perpetrators. I mean, let's be real here. I mean, Michael Cohen is not a fucking victim, really. I mean, he kind of got off light, but at least he's accepting culpability, and he's not pointing fingers per se. He's not, but he is still drawing attention to something that needs to be drawn attention to. I think he's doing it right because he is claiming culpability, and he was pretty clear about that in what I just watched. I think what he's doing is the right play. I don't think there's anything wrong with just accepting. I mean, he did get punished already, but like, if you are going to make an effort towards redemption, then that is valuable, and shouldn't be overlooked. And I don't think will be overlooked. I think that Trump, though it's disappearing, even still has a window to approach this with integrity and honesty and move past it. But if he continues to try and smother it out of existence, that is the worser sin. The cover-up is far greater of a sin at this point, most certainly. Yes, especially because the Trump element is it's just a small piece of a much larger iceberg. Because they're manipulating sexuality in a manipulative and exploitive way, in a similar way, but there is a much darker element to this, much darker, and it's all associated. So, getting that out of our society is the end goal. It is destroying men and women. It's influencing your life right now. There are people, maybe you don't know them personally, but they are influencing your life in a ton of ways, and they are effectively conditioned to the point where they aren't really fully free-willed, conscious people. Oh my gosh. And then again, this goes back to, MK Ultra. It's not just MK Ultra, from MK Ultra, Gladio, COINTELPRO, Iran Contra, all these different, and then Jonestown and Waco and Finders and North Fox and Franklin and Epstein and R. Kelly and Weinstein. This is all intertwined into a system of manipulating, intimidation, domination, and sexualization, especially sexual exploitation of children, to create essentially a dominated underling relationship, like a using sexualization to create a conditioned puppet. It's so gross, especially when reading about it, the learned helplessness element, the idea that, so you can't just normalizing it, you have to do all this other shit, sabotage them, but then come to their rescue. So you engineer a tragedy, and this is also all framing them as a bad seed, because you have to preempt their attempt to out you. You also have to create scenarios where they've had enough, and so they're going to out you, and that in that moment, everyone that they try and out the perpetrator to is complicit and gaslights them, and this happens, and then it's such a gross cycle. And the worst part about it is that this is being enabled through conflation with necessity and tough love. It's also being enabled through conflation with laziness and stuff. Employment cornering, forcing people to sacrifice their integrity in order to advance the agenda of the owner or boss in exchange for the job. So that's going on a lot in Port Huron. So what you're going to do is guarantee that people comply with a greater exploitive agenda, including exploiting themselves, Otherwise, they will be financially and opportunity cornered. Their housing will be unstable. They will get harassed by police. There will be attempts to instigate altercations with them as a means to then frame them as the aggressor and either arrest, George Floyd them, etc., etc. It's an incredibly patterned and surprisingly well-documented system, and this is including a myriad of embezzlement schemes that essentially dedicate funds to contracts, usually for construction, so demolition and construction, that aren't necessary. They're only being done so that they can embezzle through the contracts. Dude, all the scams that are running online. Like, if you're doing an actual scam and you're a person, like, that's not going to work. It's mostly government affiliated Black Ops funding stuff, like the scams that, the Nigerian Prince type stuff. All of it. So much of it is actually going to Black Ops funding, the drug trafficking, Black Ops funding, running the money, laundering it through churches. Joel Osteen's walls. This is actually really blatant if you look at all. And then when you really look at any of these 501c3s and the grants and stuff that fund them, it gets even more blatant. And then start looking at these charities. The charities locally and their financing and their filings compared to the reality of them is a laughable fabrication. I am close to wanting to just spew out a lot of very specific examples, but I'm going to continue to try and be non-punitive. Hell. Also, we're at a point now with all the threats to me, all the attempts on my life, and what am I asking for? The whole time. Simple things. We don't get here. There's no exposure. If you, one, stop interfering with my communications, two, cease to sabotage my person, steal from my person, pressure other peoples around me to sabotage, surveil, etc. Stop with the technological surveillance and interceptions. Stop with the invisible prison around Alyssa Martin, and stop intimidating Alex Martin. Stop financially manipulating the whole situation. Stop emotionally exploiting all of these people by compromising family members and creating ever more inhospitable environments for integrity as to necessitate either an altercation, which is anticipated, hoped for, and meant to discredit and disadvantage and financially ruin, and, all this stuff, put in a position of vulnerability, the target. So, oh my gosh. Just reading about these tactics for literally subjecting women to sexual violence, using peer pressure and the religious apparatus to convince them to have children that are the product of rape, then using the child as a mechanism to compel the woman not to press charges for the rape. And this is all part of a system of convincing this woman that she wanted it, normalizing it, initially through the mechanism of assumed responsibility and morality, and I guess religious something. But raping is not godly act that needs to be protected, and these women should be allowed to have those kids. Absolutely, they should be allowed to even decide they don't want to tell the kids, press the charges, all that shit, ever. But pressuring them and telling them that God himself will damn them if they have this abortion, and then using that as a thread to insert a minder into a family as a means to advance a design community hierarchical system where no one can rise in the social economic strata unless they are compromised and therefore have compelled loyalty. So if they don't have a photograph of you, kids, well, you can't own a business here. If they don't have something like that, something where if you might be unloyal or might not be obedient, they can pull it out and ruin you in a second. If they don't have that, then they are going to actively prevent your ascension. So this creates a paradigm where, what's a sociopathic selection system, where your sociopathy becomes your usefulness. One, they can compel loyalty because they can gain the compromise. Two, they can guarantee that you'll be willing to do the fucked up shit they need you to do. Three, they can guarantee that they can kill you at any time and no one will fucking miss you. Four, yeah, I mean, you guys are setting yourself up for death by fucking yourselves over, thinking you're being smart. It's so insane. And no human fucking being is benefiting from this system. We have an economic system that has been engineered so stupid that it must fail as a consequence of a boom because of the nature of the way that the money supply works in relationship to productivity. How all these dynamics plus a fiat system, it guarantees a boom-bust cycle, but not only that, it guarantees a civilizational collapse because the fiat system must continually repair its flaw in the money supply versus productivity / value creation problem. So like the more as you create more value, you're actually stressing the money supply and making good and foresighted financial decisions like investments start to tax the money supply even further, despite the fact that the value inside the economy is growing. I mean, so this is how we get to these effed up situations where we're printing trillions of dollars to make it so the economy doesn't collapse, which is really so that a bunch of people at like SoFi and SVB and wherever don't lose billions of dollars on treasury bonds, long-term treasury bonds that they got when the insurance rates had to go up because of the crazy low insurance rates. So what these treasury bonds are all about is you gain an interest, right? And then these derivatives. But anyway, you gain an interest based on, their maturity. And because the older bonds were sold at a higher interest rate, they were paying out greater, right? And so then you get derivatives based on the interest. And so the derivatives that some of these banks were heavily invested in had to do with the long-term treasury note interest return versus the short-term treasury note interest return. But when the interest rates changed, because the interest rates had to go up, they were still like 60% in these long-term treasury notes. The treasury notes weren't even the actual treasury notes, they're derivatives on the treasury notes. So their value became like worthless because you could buy a brand new treasury note and have more fucking profit on interest than you could on this 30-year-old treasury note. So, and it's a derivative. It's not the actual treasury note. It's just the interest on the treasury note. Even worse, a lot of these are second and third degree derivatives where it's not even the interest on the treasury note. It's the change in interest on the treasury note versus a currently issued treasury note. So the fact that the worst position you could be in was the position that SVB was in, and they were bailed out. And but it wasn't just SVB. They bailed out essentially the entire long-term treasury bond market. And this happened over and over again. CARES gave $1 trillion to the oil and gas industry because they shut down the economy for a couple months. Now, forget the fact that the other fucking 2 quarters were the most profitable in history for those fucking industries, but we gave them $1 trillion. More money than they gave to all of the Americans for the unemployment insurance, they gave to the oil and gas industry. And then they talk about the inflation because of giving away the money that they did to unemployment insurance. This is the simulacrum, right? The inflation has to do with printing 5 times more money in the past 7 years than was printed in the history of the United States. That is what is causing the inflation. They are fixing problems
in the balance sheets of really poorly managed banks, by printing so much money, it is making your money less valuable. It's golden parachuting. It's guaranteeing who wins. That's the design community thing. It's not about a competition. It's not about a meritocracy. It's literally giving money to people that have proven loyalty, cronyism, value, leverage, blackmail, whatever. That is what it's about. It's not about productivity. It's not about value creation. It's not about demand or even supply, because all of the money is being printed and handed to banks and shit. So it's not like, alright, when you print that much money and you hand it to treasury bondholders and banks and shit, that's more money than exists, period. What the fuck? So you just destroyed your own economy. And the problem is they didn't fix any problems, because all these problems still exist. They're going to have to keep doing IORB. They're going to have to keep doing QE in order to fix these problems, because in their too big to fail model, these businesses can't fail. It's like everything about this. They create these huge corporations so that if they fail, the economy in large part will take a huge hit. So they're too big to fail. And so now they just commit crimes. There were over 1 million cases of fucking, oh my gosh, what's a document fraud associated, or is it loan fraud or something associated with the mortgages? You know, the 2008, the TARP and everything. There's over 1 million cases of fraud of over $100,000 associated with these. Not the mortgage holders, not the people that bought the house, the loan officers. And this was part of a collusion thing to build a bunch of McMansions and straddle a bunch of people with debt they couldn't afford and give them these balloon payment mortgages and convince them that they would be able to afford in the future when they got a better job. And that even if they didn't, it wouldn't matter because the house would continue to appreciate. They fucking reamed these people. And then they are making them pay for their houses that they don't own, that was given back to the banks, that literally defrauded them. Because, if they were given mortgages that they could afford, then they could have afforded them. The only way that they get foreclosed on is if they buy houses they can't afford. So the fact that, Wells Fargo and these big banks were coordinating tens of thousands of fraudulent mortgages each, like every major bank, that's a coordinated effort to create a chattel workforce that is leveraged by housing and security. And because the buying power of most entry-level working situations doesn't afford you the income to get even a studio apartment. I mean, this is an economy where less than slave wages are the norm, while the millennial generation has the average working week that is the longest in history. They pretend like the millennials are lazy. I mean, I've done it. I've worked 70-hour weeks for years. It's a joke. It's so crazy. With no money, no leverage, no power, no authority, it is utterly insane. The baby boomers have been in these positions of authority for decades, and all they really have done is let infrastructure atrophy and created an obedient system based on Nazi concentration camp logic. That's our fucking... That's why the Epstein stuff even exists. I mean, you've heard the asset agent thing, right? The reason he looks like an asset agent is because he looks exactly like that, because that's what they do. They collect human assets, turn them into objects, sell them, and then sell material that's produced from selling them as objects. So however these people want to treat them, you record it, and then you extort them based on that. And that's why these rituals, these Freemason rituals and shit, the top people, they're going to be wearing masks. That is compromat. Your ritual is a means to incriminate you and compel you to do whatever they want after you stop believing the bullshit. That's why they're all fucked up. And that's why it's secret. You don't have to keep secrets if you're not doing something fucked up. You just don't. what secret do you need? I mean, they don't. It's it, and I have gotten all the material now. Like I have an understanding of the beliefs of Freemasonry up to 33 degrees. I've been smuggled some pretty interesting material. I mean, it's fascinating, and I get the logic, but it's just not. It's not real. There's valuable information there, and the Freemasons were built on a fucking like right-minded thing, but it has been captured literally, and you can document the capture. This was an orchestrated thing that happened in Germany, happened in France, and then ended up happening here. In fact, it happened here earlier. The first time the Freemasons were captured was in the run-up and wake to the Civil War. A bunch of massively wealthy slave owners figured the best way to influence policy was to capture the the Masonic lodges, give them money and stuff, and so, grant a new lodge, and then through that money, homogenize them, and then Jim Crow, KKK, all these things are formed from the existing organizational structure of the Freemasons, and because the money that was going in from these slave owners that were chapped about not being able to do any Mandigo anymore, are like bribing the milieu of the Freemasonry into being eugenicist racists. And so by the time Gelenorg, William King Harvey, and all that kind of come back to America with that Nazi shit, it just gets taken up. Oh my word. The William King Harvey, not even a person anymore. Apparently he's I don't even know, a baton. Alright, so I guess the point is Michael Cohen, way to grow up. That's a great fucking pivot. I mean, okay, it's not about, you ever stay in federal prison and not having a pillow, and then Ghislaine Maxwell having premium, it's not about, Michael Cohen still, really, let's be real, got off easy, but you're not also wrong to be trapped about the situation, because you did get off hard compared to the elitist bullshit crap. And I mean, I get that you probably weren't involved in the shit, but you probably knew about it. I don't know. It's hard to know from my perspective at this point. But, yeah, I guess it's not important you live a perfect life. It's just that you don't sit there and gaslight people like you did, especially when you're trafficking kids. I mean, it's just and the jig is up. It's going to take a profound amount of psychosocial economic wrangling in order to convince the public that you're not involved in this. I mean, it shouldn't be possible. Maybe it's possible considering what I've come to know and learn, but it's unlikely possible, and the amount of political capital and actual capital it'll take is enormous. That's what I was making this for. So yeah, a terrorist attack, and then a war. Fuck, that's the play. Shit. Yeah, that's the play, and I've used it before. So we need to first preempt this. Charlie Kirk was exactly an attempt to create a terrorist event that would then rally people behind the president and distract them from stuff like this. The fact that Charlie Kirk's death was clearly and pretty explicitly coordinated by the FBI and by specifically agents directly loyal to Trump, I mean, this is so telegraphed, is one of the things, this incompetency level is one of the few things that's saving humanity. I mean, let's go back to Trump's almost getting shot. That was such a meticulously orchestrated theater. They created a perimeter that made it so the only person that had eyes and responsibility for the most obvious sniper location was the group leader or whatever. And despite this, there were like 7 reports of someone getting into that position. And the guy that's supposed to be watching this commits to a series of maneuvers that create plausible deniability that he might not have seen them. But like, it took such an orchestrated familiarity with not only that terrain, but also the plan of the sniper. There's no way that wasn't what you call, it might not have been staged all the way. They might not have paid him. They might have. But, I said might. But the important thing is that, they knew it was happening and decided, in the case of the Donald Trump assassination attempt, we have to assume, because of the clear intent to allow the assassin to get into position and fire rounds, that there was probably modification to the bullets or to the gun, or they had trained him on a weapon that was intentionally, like, they could manipulate the sights, they could intentionally not teach him how to use the sights properly or manipulate them properly. They could do a lot of different things to make him think that he's hitting the target with incredible accuracy, but in fact he's a horrible shot. Or they could just teach him normal, maybe he's a good shot, maybe he's a great shot, but they could sabotage the weapon or the bullets. There's a lot of different ways to do this. The point is, though, Trump didn't get shot in the ear. He just didn't. And so, the fact that all that shit, I mean, they already made 2 attempts to create a terrorist threat that would galvanize the country behind Donald Trump and be able to wash over this. And now they're going to have to go big. They're going to have to go 9/11 level. And that will be an excuse to commit troops in Israel. And that will be the end of any question to Donald Trump, because then he'll be able to leverage the 9/11 echo that these colors don't run, love it or leave it, if you don't support the war, I will attack you. I mean, and this is, so the same people, WWF, right, World Wrestling, whatever, that was, everyone knew that was bogus, but a little under half the population imposed the interpretation that it was real on the rest of the population, such that they convinced enough of people so that the people that knew it was fake didn't talk about it for fear of ramifications. People that didn't know were victims of these bullies that are telling them it's real, and I mean, this went on forever. But it's that mentality of being able to create something so obviously bullshit and then curate a population to enforce it as reality. That is what this modern political thing is looking for. I mean, so Cambridge Analytica and CIA, a lot of these political operatives are hiring from that pool. There is a real connection between CIA and WWF, a significant one. And then you think about, oh, of course, Vincent Mann's a fucking goddamn sex offender, of course. And we go into freaking Dartmouth and how tainted the American Psychological Association is with just, wow, the amount of effort put into convincing the psychology academic culture that healthy women prefer rape. I mean, it's insane. Look into Dartmouth and Animal House. It's a fucking disgusting display of the truth behind our misogynistic and intentionally predatory. I'm sorry, I didn't think this even, but it's there. It's not even, it's so there. There's so much that needs to be looked at with closer eyes, because it has been authored explicitly and intentionally to modify human behavior in a very, very negative way. And then this wasn't done to advance science. This was done to advance a coercive control model that has been advancing for decades. It's so crazy. And the fact that I think it's crazy is part of the psyop, right? Is to create a pathologization of the thought. To make it so even thinking that this could be true is crazy. But the financials are there. Everything's there. I have dozens now of intelligence personnel. I might have two. No, I definitely have a dozen contacts within Central Intelligence Agency, and a lot of those are pretty high up. I mean, I'm not like, it's interesting, I'll just say it like that, and now this shit's too stupid. It's an agenda that is literally destroying the planet. It's based on an agenda that has to destroy the planet. They don't understand that their own model is ruining their own lives and limiting their own capabilities. Like alright, so I want to bring on the altruism economy. Alright, so the altruism economy, my concept, is the idea of a proof of value money that is arbitrated or, overseen by an AI platform that then also, organizes, create opportunities for labor and stuff. So it starts as proof of value through mining of cryptocurrency. Every time a crypto asset is successfully mined by the platform, which is pool mining AI mediated platform, it also mints a cryptocurrency, which is technically called Halcoin. The idea of calling it Anchor is a good idea. But anyway, so this becomes a production or value-backed thing, right? So you're mining an objectively valuable cryptocurrency, right? So that is a proof of value, and then you're minting your coin based on that proven value. Then you branch out to other things, and the first thing is like syrup or like plastic recycling, something that an untapped resource where the productivity is objectively, adding to the GDP, and then it adds to the money supply through the production-backed mechanism. But the reason that this really works is because it means that the economy there is backed not by gold, which is finite and it's really not like universally useful, right? You don't need gold to make something valuable. It's not trade and barter because you still need to be able to make microtransactions add up to NASA, like 1% taxation add up to healthcare, So you need money. But the money can't be supply limited based on success. It needs to be money supply, not printed arbitrarily and given to a bunch of cronies, produced through an unbiased arbitrator's appraisal of value production, which can be completely defined. And that can be tethered to fiat currency values, normalized against the conversion to the crypto asset, and then obviously the HAL asset. These all can stabilize one another.